All right, and we're back with Grant Burge of Australia. We're talking about some of the differences that his old vines make to his wines, his history with his family that goes right back to 1855. Grant, I'd like to ask you about more modern issues now. What trends and important changes are you seeing in the Australian wine industry, especially recently, like in the last 2 to 3 years? What's happening that is important?
Um, the it's interesting that there's a specialisation of as we started exporting in the 90s, and as we've been exposed to other countries and other wines around the world. I think and a lot of Europe and so forth have specialised over the centuries into the grape varieties and the wines that they do exceptionally well. Obviously, Northern Rhone is known for its Shiraz wine, Southern Rhone for its blends, um, you know, um, Bordeaux for its highly sort of Cabernet type wines and so forth. I think in Australia, because well, we have had export markets, but mainly for fortified wines in the 30s and 50s. But from a table wine point of view, it's really only been a new phenomenon in the 90s. And a lot of wineries made very many different styles and types of wine. Um, we've seen the consumer, as it's been exposed to more wines from around the world. Ross is starting to get a name for red wine, Shiraz and other reds. Eden Valley for its Rieslings, Adelaide Hills for Sauvignon Blanc. And so districts, and this is the public choosing this is not the winemakers, the public is sort of latching on to things that areas do well. So the Barossa, being a very big Shiraz area, is getting a bigger Shiraz area because that's what people want to buy from the Barossa. Riesling's getting better in Eden Valley and Sauvignon Blanc and so forth in Adelaide Hills. So that's and we obviously follow the market. So we've become a lot more specialised. So some of the white grapes, Semillon, which is a shame in a way because Semillon grows exceptionally well in the Barossa, makes a very good wine, but it's a fuller style and not quite as overtly fruity on the it's nice citrus characters, but it's um, very much um, it's nowhere near as overtly fruity as they say in New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. So those sort of wines have really taken off at the expense of Semillon. So we're pulling out Semillon because we don't need as much and replanting with red grapes. So in the last 2 or 3 years, that specialisation I think is the thing that's really I've noticed the most.
Right, because there tends to be a myth more further away from Australia that it's all big Shiraz, but the whole thing about regionality is really coming to the fore now, and I think consumers are recognizing that different parts of the country do produce different styles of wine. Speaking of that, you have a couple of wines with you today that we should. First one is your summer Chardonnay. So why don't you show us that one, and then let's chat about that one first. Okay, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can see it.
yeah.
Great. So tell me about this Chardonnay, like where it's grown, what makes it different.
Well, this vineyard, I bought this in 1988 when I started Grant Burge Wines. I initially bought it for sparkling wine because it had a lot of Pinot and Chardonnay in it. But we found out quite quickly that if we ripen the Chardonnay a little bit more, it could actually make a really good table wine because this vineyard is very high in altitude, probably one of the top three highest vineyards in the Eden Valley, about 550 metres above sea level. So it is a very cooler, and the grapes only ripen mid to late April, and they really carry their acidity well. So we've always found that this could make a really good table wine. So probably for the last 15 or so years, we've been this has been our premier Chardonnay from this particular vineyard.
And we should say that just for those who may not be familiar, but of course you're on the southern hemisphere, so your harvest, your fall is April, and that's why
Yes,
you're talking April,
yes,
which
yes, yes.
and the fact that it's high altitude means cool or especially cool nights, which preserve the acidity. And in Chardonnay, that's got to be a nice element to what is often a rich, very buttery kind of wine.
Yeah.
That's probably adding some nice nervy acidity, acidic backbone.
Yes, that's right. Although in 1996, when I was doing another project, went to the Southern Rhone to study Grenache Shiraz Mourvedre. On the way back, we called into Burgundy and we spent a week there looking at a lot of wines. And probably came back and changed my whole thoughts on Chardonnay. We decided that we'd make a lot more finer, more vibrant, probably, yeah, more vibrant sort of Chardonnay. We dropped the alcohol back. I mean, wine's all about balance. So if you've got a finer, more delicate style, you have to do the same thing with your oak regime. Otherwise, you get the wine totally out of balance. In Australia, we don't do a lot of malolactic. In Europe, because they've got high acidities, they do to get the acidity down and give themselves richness. We can easily get richness, and we're always striving to get acidity. So we only do a small amount of malo. Probably in this wine would only ever be about 10 to 15%, and it's more of a flavour. When you do malo, you get that buttery sort of character, as you say, and a fuller, rounder, richer sort of wine. And so we do a little bit of that to give the nice round and richness. But we when we crush the grapes and run the juice off, and also the other thing is we all use French oak in this wine, but we don't really use many new barrels anymore. 10% new barrels would be the absolute maximum. But we run the juice into the barrels, ferment everything in barrel, and even in some of the batches we don't use cultured yeast, we use natural yeast. At the end of the day, we get many different batches of wine that we can choose from to blend this wine and manufacture a blend that's going to give us all the components we look for in a really top Chardonnay.
And we should just say that for those who don't know, malo is short for malolactic fermentation. It's a fermentation that the wine can go through to take those harsh acids that are naturally in the wine and smooth them out to more lactic or softer acids, which gives that round mouthfeel you're talking about.
Yes, exactly.
And so as a result, with this style of wine that has that bit of citrus lift to it and yet still full body, what dishes would you pair with this wine?
I think this will go for the broader fish dishes and even the lighter meat dishes, so chicken and maybe even a ragu that's not too big a meat dish that is a bit on the lighter side. But look, there are people who do like red meat with because it is a fuller style of wine and it's got plenty of flavour and character to actually match up with fuller-bodied meats. But in general, it's probably more the broader type dishes and the lighter meat dishes.
Terrific. And you also have a red there with you, a Shiraz. Let's talk about that.
Yes, we do.
Product shot.
Here we are.
Okay, there it is.
My Amber Shiraz. Now this one is a single vineyard wine, and My Amber is the name of one of my vineyards. It's one that I've actually developed, although it is quite a historical vineyard. It's probably had grapes on it for 80 years or so. Well, I bought it in 1983, but it was owned by another wine company who decided that it wasn't economic anymore, although that's debatable because it had 80-year-old Shiraz on it, and I'm sure they could have been viable, but anyway, for whatever reason, they didn't think so, and they pulled all the vines out. Helen and I leased the property for 3 years, and then we bought it at auction in 1983. Initially, I've just farmed it because I didn't think I needed any more grapes at the time, but we did sink some wells for underground water, which we found. But then we could see in the mid-80s that export was going to take off. So we decided to start replanting this property. So it's not all, it's actually my single biggest vineyard. I've got about 160 acres there. And probably half of it is Shiraz. It's not all Shiraz. And so those Shiraz are a bit over 20 years old now. And well, I'm a great believer that it probably takes about 10 years for vines to really settle down, get balanced, and start producing some really good fruit. And now, being 20 years old, they're really starting to produce some very good fruit. I mean, when they're 40 and 50 years old, they'll even produce better fruit. But at this stage, still producing a really good, well-structured Barossa Shiraz. We're at the southern end of the Barossa Valley, so it's towards the Adelaide Hills. So it's a valley, Lindok Valley they call it, and you get warm temperatures during the day, but you do get a lot of draining off of the warm temperatures at night, so you get reasonably cool nights, and you get very plummy, spicy sort of characters, even violet, and even a little bit of blackberry characters in Shiraz from that area. Obviously, this is matured in mainly American oak, but also a little bit of French. So I think it's about 80-20, American and French. American gives you a beautiful vanilla sort of sweetness character. We use medium toast on the oak, so you get a nice mocha character as well. And 2008 vintage was a really rich vintage. It was in the end marred by a big heat wave, but we got most of our fruit off before the heat wave. And because the vintage started off, we thought it was going to be an absolute crackerjack. And it went that way until we had the heat wave. But we got, as I said, most of our fruit off before them. And so we've got a really nice, rich Barossa Shiraz with dark in colour, plenty of flavour, and nice soft tannins at the end. So we're very happy with this wine, the way it's turning out.
Terrific. And so with this spicy, dark fruited Shiraz, what do you think? A grilled steak, or what would you pair with it?
Absolutely. It's a big wine, but it's rich in flavour. It's not, I mean, it's certainly got tannins there. This wine will last for some time. And so red meat dishes would go really well with this.
That sounds terrific. Yeah. Well, you've done your job, Grant. You've made me and probably anybody who's watching this thirsty and hungry. So I want to thank you for joining me today. It was great to hear about your wines, and it's exciting and it's gratifying to see a family-owned business continue. So I wish you all the best with that.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk with you and great to be here. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.